right, welcome everyone to OHASTA's Unlocked webinar series. It's the first night of our 4 webinar series, which will be going until December 10th. We have 2 presenters here tonight, and we're going to start with Anthony Badame, who is the Ontario Coordinator for Honouring Bravery. And as a museum professional, he has more than 10 years of experience with educational programming. And so I'm sure that he has lots of great details and information to share with us tonight that we can take back to our classrooms and implement as soon as possible. So thank you, Anthony, for joining us this evening, and thank you to all of our guests. Go ahead.
All right, well, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here, so bear with me a moment. Okay, perfect. So as was said, my name is Anthony Badame. I am the Ontario Coordinator for Honouring Bravery. I'm very excited to be here with all of you tonight to speak a little bit about our program and some of the interesting materials that we have for Remembrance Day specifically. So let's get started. Before I begin speaking about the products we have, I thought it would be important to kind of speak a little bit about the program itself. So Honoring Bravery is a military history learning program of Canada Company. We're still relatively new. We started in 2024. Canada Company itself is a military charity that helps support members of the Canadian Armed Forces and their families. And they do this through 3 pillars, one being wellness, one being awareness, and the third being education. And we're part of that, along with our sister program, Je me souviens in Quebec. So our job for Honoring Bravery is to provide engaging content about Canada's military history to classrooms across the country. And essentially, we do this by using fact-based storytelling that focuses on the authentic stories of Canada's diverse military members from across the nation. Our resources are all provided for free. We try to reduce the amount of barriers as much as possible for teachers and students to use our resources. And when we started in 2024, our sole focus actually was Remembrance Day. Since then, we've expanded to a variety of other resources, more specifically for secondary students, grade 10 history. But our Remembrance Day program still is a very well loved program over the last year. In fact, we've had over 24,000 users access our Remembrance Day resources online. And that's what I'm going to be speaking to you a little bit more about today. Why use our resources in general, though? There's a variety of reasons why our resources provide a great starting point for teachers. One is that all of our resources help to foster empathy and empower students to make a difference in their own communities. We really try to ensure that the stories that we're telling are reflective of the students who are going to be reading and seeing these stories. And we want to make sure that the stories that we're being told will help to demonstrate a way that individuals can make a difference in Canadian society. All of our lesson plans that are associated with our program are created by Ontario teachers for Ontario teachers. So you can be rest assured that it fits well within the curriculum that it's supposed to. And they all focus on historical thinking concepts, so things like historical significance. They are the prime component of all of the resources that we have. We try to use as much as possible interesting primary sources, and we try to curate those for teachers to make it easy for you to use in your own classroom. And all of our products are completely turnkey and free. So again, we provide all of the services for free. Most of them are just available online for you to download yourself or use. And again, we provide all the information that you need to actually use the resource. So we have a number of different products that are great for general military history and Remembrance Day as well. So I thought I'd speak a little bit about those before going into our specific Remembrance Day products. Our main key product that we actually have are exhibits. So currently we have 3 exhibits. We're hoping to have another one up in early of next year on the war in Afghanistan. But currently we have 2 World War I exhibits and 1 World War II exhibit. The World War I exhibit, we have a general World War I exhibit that looks at Canada's contribution to the war, and another one that looks at military nurses during the First World War. Our World War II exhibit looks at the Normandy invasion and Canada's contribution to that. And the interesting thing about this specific exhibit is that it also comes as a traveling exhibit that can go into schools. So currently, it is in schools across the province, and people, teachers or schools themselves can order a copy of the exhibit to bring to your school. So it works, and again, that's all done completely for free. So we cover any costs associated with shipping as well. We again want to include and create an immersive experience for students, and we know that a lot of teachers can't, for numerous different reasons, bring students to museums in their local community. So we try to bring that to them. All of these exhibits have associated lesson plans with them. So these are complete resource packages. Again, they come with those curated sources that can be used to do the lesson plan. It has all the evaluation tools and worksheets associated with it as well. Currently, the majority of them are for again, for grade 10 history, but as you'll see with our remembrance resources, we have other lessons that are for other grades as well. We also have a variety of games and activities on our website. We try to make this history as engaging and interesting as possible. The game actually that this is from that you can see here is a game for our nursing exhibit. So students actually play as a military nurse during the First World War and have to make decisions on how to treat patients based on information they're getting at the military hospital. So it's a great way for getting students who may not necessarily be that interested in history or military history in general, interested in learning. And we also have a blog. So every month we try to update our blog, and it covers a variety of different topics. The one that's pointed here is about Len and Cub, who were a 2S LGBTQ plus couple that were in the First World War, and talks about their experiences both during the war and after. But we also have a variety of other things, everything from food in the First World War to how the Suez Crisis actually affected the creation of the Canadian flag. So a lot of interesting stories in there as well. But as I said, when we started the program, we did focus solely on Remembrance Day. And one of the reasons why we did this is we were hearing from teachers across the country and from parents as well that students are having a harder time connecting with Remembrance Day. You know, we often hear words like bravery and sacrifice, and students are asked to reflect on, you know, these words or reflect on the meanings of remembrance, but they don't necessarily know what to reflect on. I mean, I even know myself when I was a student, we were asked to do a moment of silence, and I would often kind of stand there, not really sure what exactly to do because my family didn't have a connection with military history. And I think this is something that we're seeing happen more and more, especially just because of the amount of time that's gone between conflicts like World War I and World War II and today. So in fact, as most of you are aware, there aren't any veterans left from World War I, and there's less than 7,300 veterans from World War II and the Korean War that are left from Canada. Um, this number actually is a little out of date. It's the newest number that we have, but it's from last Remembrance Day. So that number is already substantially less. And with time, a lot of these stories are being forgotten and becoming less accessible to students, and they're finding it more and more difficult to connect. Another thing is that many students just don't see their own selves reflected in the stories that are being told. Historically, a lot of the stories that are told about the military are of white men. But as I hope you'll see today through the presentation, that there are a lot of other stories of diverse individuals with lots of different lived experiences that can really create a connection with students today as well. So our Remembrance Day programs, we kind of think of it as being a bridge between the past and the present. We try to create learning moments for students who may not necessarily have that connection to the importance of Remembrance Day. We break down the words like sacrifice and give concrete examples of Canadians who embody these concepts. And that helps to create a more awareness and appreciation for members of the military. And we hope that this will actually bring a new sense of understanding and appreciation for Remembrance Day as well. So we do have a number of Remembrance Day specific resources. The ones that I'm going to speak most about tonight are our Commemorating Bravery resources, which are modules that are created to help teach stories basically around remembrance. And I'll speak about those in a moment, but we do have other more general Remembrance Day resources as well. For students and teachers who are interested in creating their own Remembrance Day assembly for whatever reason, maybe you don't have one in your school, or maybe your school wants to update that. We have a how-to guide to go through. There's one for a younger, like a junior audience, and then a more senior level as well. That will help provide you with sources and resources to enhance your Remembrance Day assembly. One of those resources actually is our Military Heroes Through History slide deck. So for teachers who are just interested in maybe highlighting different individuals that they may not necessarily know about, the slide deck is a great place to start. It has individuals from World War I to today, from a diverse background, who have made significant contributions to the Canadian military. We also have a timeline of the Canadian Armed Forces. So this is a great uh, piece to use if you're interested in looking at changes over time in the armed forces or to look at historically significant events. The timeline goes basically from the War of 1812 to the present, and highlights those historic events that have happened. We also have a docuseries that was also created in partnership with TVO. This docu-series was made for an adult audience, but is very good for a secondary school audience as well. It highlights 4 different conflicts or peacekeeping missions that we generally don't speak enough about. One being the Korean War, another being the war in Afghanistan. We have one on the peacekeeping mission in Cyprus and another in the peacekeeping missions in former Yugoslavia. And the great thing about this is that it's telling the story of these conflicts through individuals who actually were there. But the main piece of our Remembrance Day resources is, in fact, our Commemorating Bravery modules. So these modules are broken down to specific age groups and focus on different aspects of Remembrance Day. Um, because they're modular, it's great for students, first of all, within the module to kind of increase and build upon their learning, but also throughout time in school, they also can build their learning. So, for example, you may start, your school may start in kindergarten. You could use the respect and responsibility. And as the students age, they learn different aspects of Remembrance Day with our modules. So the first module we have is our K-2 module, which is respect and responsibility. The core idea of this module is to learn about the roles and responsibilities of members of the Canadian Armed Forces and learn what it means to show respect on Remembrance Day. For grades 3 to 5, we talk about remembrance and bravery. So this module speaks about the origins of Remembrance Day, and also what it actually means to be brave. And we break it down into the characteristics of bravery. For grades 6 to 8, we have service and sacrifice. So this looks at reasons why Canadians may decide to serve in the armed forces, and also look at why Canada decided to engage in certain conflicts over its history. It also looks at the kind of results of serving and the kind of sacrifices that many individuals have made as part of that service. And then for our secondary audience, grades 9 to 12, we have our Trailblazers and Changemakers module, which looks at individuals who have positively impacted Canadian society, whether it's through their military their actual military service or after as a veteran. It also looks at kind of changes that have occurred as a result of military technology and medical advancements in the military. So each of these modules is based around that three-part lesson plan that many of you are probably familiar with, the Minds-On action and consolidation components. The Minds-On piece of each one of these includes a lot of reflection. We have a lot of journaling. We realize that the material that's being taught around Remembrance Day can often be difficult for many students. So as a way of helping them to deal with that kind of material in a trauma-informed way, we try to increase and allow for places for teachers to have that discussion and have that reflection. It also helps with social emotional learning, which again is important in across the curriculum as well. Um, as you move forward into the action piece, students then get to interact and engage with the material in a different way. We try to create a variety of different interactive pieces. So, for example, for this part of the Remembrance and Bravery activity, we break down bravery into specific characteristics, things like courage, and give a definition of responding in the face of fear. We also provide specific examples that are relatable to students and get them to connect those to those real life events. So, for example, at the bottom here, things like speaking up for someone being treated unfairly. That's something that they can relate to in their own lives as well. And of course, the consolidation part consolidates all their learning and provides a tool for self evaluation. But more importantly, we have a Discover More section in each one of these that helps to create a call to action for Remembrance Day. Again, we have seen and have been told by many teachers that, it's difficult for those students to connect. But when you have an actual call to action that can be used as part of a Remembrance Day ceremony, it can help to create those connections. So for the younger grades, it's a more of an artistic piece. So again, creating, in this case, a poem based on Remembrance Day. But that's something that can then be displayed or said at the Remembrance Day ceremony. For older students, there's usually a research component that's associated with the module. And those research pieces can then help to either, again, be displayed or spoken about at a Remembrance Day ceremony or as part of Remembrance, or it can be used to give the student an anchor, something to think about while reflecting during Remembrance Day. So every single one of our modules and our work is always based around those real stories. So I thought I'd share some of those real stories with you tonight that you can see in our modules and get an idea of the kinds of stories that we're speaking about. So on the left here, we have Witan Louis. Witan Walter Louis was a soldier in the First World War. He was in radio operations and fell in love with radios. So after the war, he actually went to the United States, became an engineer, and came back up to Canada in Orillia, Ontario, and decided that he wanted to open up a business for radio repair. But because he was Chinese Canadian, he wasn't allowed to have a business license. So he wasn't able to open up his shop. So as a result, he, in a kind of peaceful protest, he wrote a letter to the prime minister, giving back his medals and his uniform, and basically said, I have done all of this work to serve the country, and yet I can't even get a business license because of my background, and basically showed the unfairness of the situation. And as a result, the prime minister actually gave him a formal apology, and he was able to get his business license and became a pillar in the community in Aurelia up until his death, I believe, in the 1970s. Curly Christian was an African American soldier who came to Canada and later became a Canadian citizen. But he served during the First World War and actually is Canada's only surviving quadruple amputee during the First World War. Um, that didn't stop him. He came back after serving and created a program to help support other veterans and actually worked very closely with the war amps as well. Frank Moritsugu is a great example of resilience. He actually just recently passed away at the age of 102, but during the early years of the Second World War, he and his family were sent to internment camps because he was Japanese Canadian and they were considered enemy aliens. Later on during the Second World War, as Canada needed more individuals to work for as interpreters for Japanese soldiers that they were interacting with, Frank Moritsugu actually decided to volunteer and to enlist. And part of the reason why he did that was to prove and demonstrate that Japanese Canadians were just as patriotic as others. And he actually eventually became a journalist and helped with Japanese redress in the 1980s as well. A true example of military leadership is Oliver Milton Martin from the Six Nations Reserve here in Ontario. He actually led a troop of Indigenous soldiers during the First World War. And during the Second World War, he became Canada's highest ranking Indigenous soldier. He was a brigadier general and helped to train a variety of military soldiers, both here in Ontario and in BC. He also was a teacher and a principal, and actually he became Ontario's first Indigenous judge as well. And he was a huge proponent for education, specifically for Indigenous Canadians. Chris Dupee is another example, a strong example of resilience. He was a soldier during the war in Afghanistan. And after he came back, he started to realize that he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And going through his own health journey, he realized that there was a need for more supports for individuals to help share some of their stories and to help with that healing process. So he actually created a company, which he still runs today, that helps support members of the armed forces as well as first responders who have gone through traumatic experiences. And a real true leader and trailblazer, of course, is Sandra Perron, who is actually the interviewee in our docu-series for the peacekeeping in Yugoslavia and is also featured in our 9 to 12 module. But she started her time in the military during a time when women were not allowed to have the same roles as men. She really wanted to be in the infantry in a combat role, but when she started, women were not allowed to be in combat roles in the military. She eventually was able to become Canada's first infantry officer, female infantry officer, and led troops in former Yugoslavia, and realized again, similar to Chris Dupee, that there was a need for a space for women specifically in the military to kind of share camaraderie and to share experiences. So very recently, she created her own organization that helps support women who are transitioning out of the military. So again, each one of these stories that I've highlighted today show ways in which little things can make a difference in Canadian society. These acts of either peaceful protest or finding a way to make a difference in your own life and the lives of others around you. All of those help to strengthen the idea of how to find ways and empower students to create a more stronger Canada for the future. And those are the kinds of stories that we try to highlight through our work at Honoring Bravery. So I'd like to thank you all for joining me today. I hope that I've provided you with a little bit of insight into our programming and how you might use it during Remembrance Day or during other parts of the year when you're learning about military history. If you have any questions at the end of tonight's discussion, feel free to contact us. Our email is at education@honoringbravery.ca. If you go to our website, which is just honoringbravery.ca, there's a whole section on Remembrance Day, so you can take a look through all of the materials that I've just spoken about. And also feel free to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram. Our tagline is Honoring Bravery. So thank you again for having me tonight, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Anthony. That was a lot of food for thought and so many great resources for like K to 12. Like I'm just excited. I kind of want this to be over so that I can go and check out the website.
Well, please
Um,
do, but
yeah,
let's not
yeah,
rush things.
that's the plan. All right, thank you so much. Um, we do have just a moment. Did anyone in our audience have a question or comment before we move on to our next presentation?
Hi. So Anthony, I emailed you a few weeks ago about getting the D-Day exhibit, which I'm going to use in December, and then
Yeah, wonderful.
in Cayuga, and I've got a really great group of kids down there, and I have a very challenging grade 10 history class right now, and your World War I module was so student friendly. Like it's just so
Oh, well,
accessible
thank
for
you.
them. So I just wanted to let anyone know some like really complex topics. It's a really that home front section. I've used that one specifically just to dive into those topics. And it's just an incredible way to it's like a museum. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for the work that you've done in making it so accessible. And if anyone
Oh, well, thank
is
you.
wondering whether or not it's worth it, it's totally worth it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for those words. That means a lot. We always love feedback from the teachers who are using our resources. So again, if you do use our resources, let us know too, because it really helps us to find ways to make them better. So thank you so much for sharing that, Megan.
Mhm.
Thank you, Megan. All right. Butch, did you
Sure.
want to add?
I'll just say I appreciated the attention to detail on that too, Anthony, with the idea of sharing the story for these veterans when they come back to Canada. Like we talk so much in our history courses about what they did in the actual war itself, and that's where students might not see that connection. But when you see and hear somebody who looks like you and acts like you and is from your community, being successful and kind of reintegrating back into society, that's going to help us to make connections with those kids in different ways too. So I really think that's a great
Yeah.
idea. So good
Yeah,
job.
and that was, well, thank you. And that was something that we had really considered because again, if you look at the historical way that we teach Remembrance Day, it is often about battles. It's the battle history. They did this, they did that. We wanted to make sure too that the people that we were looking at weren't just individuals that won like a medal as well. We wanted to look at people who were just ordinary Canadians that did something to help their communities as well. So thank you for saying that, Butch, because that was very intentional.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do
you're
you have
right.
people who, or
Go ahead,
sorry,
Butch.
go ahead. Do you have people that you still take on as part of that story? Like, do you still search for different stories that are out there, or how would?
Yeah, so we're always constantly looking for new stories
Okay,
and information. If it doesn't get into one of our exhibits, that's where our blog posts are great. So we do highlight individuals on a regular basis, and actually even on our social media, there are individuals that are highlighted there that aren't highlighted in our blog posts. So check those out too, because you'll get more stories that way as well. And there's
thank
so
you.
many great stories.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I was just going to say that, veterans are members of our community, right? They're not just members of the military. So yeah,
yeah.
that's a great addition. Yeah, for the kids. All right, I will turn things over to Valerie.
Good. Okay, so my name is Valerie Laniu. I am also a member of OHASTA exec. Thank you for sharing these resources, Anthony, and thank you for Vanessa for kicking off the first webinar in the series. Right now, I'm very pleased to introduce Andrea McArthur from the Canadian Red Cross. She has spent many years working as a speaker, a facilitator, an educator. Her focus is on youth engagement, social justice, and humanitarian issues. She now supports teachers in bringing humanitarian education into the classroom and is very passionate about the impact that these conversations can have on students. We're very grateful to Andrea and the Red Cross for joining us tonight and for sharing these valuable educational resources. And I'll hand it over to Andrea to guide us through her presentation and that will allow us to kind of help our students reflect meaningfully on the topic of war.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I'll just take a moment. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I'm just gonna try to share my slide deck. And it looks like we have it ready to go here. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much again for welcoming me here tonight. My name is Andrea. I'm the Senior Specialist of Humanitarian Education and International Humanitarian Law with the Canadian Red Cross. Today, I'm here to provide a brief introduction to all of our lesson packs for teachers, which help guide student reflections on armed conflict, in particular from the humanitarian perspective. And today I happen to be joining everybody from the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, specifically from the Niagara Peninsula. So you might be wondering, what is humanitarian education? What you see here is a still of our 5-minute promotional video on humanitarian education at the Canadian Red Cross. This video focuses on the definition of humanitarian education, which focuses on international humanitarian law and related humanitarian themes. For those of you who wish to view the video later, I'm just posting it here in the chat alongside a few other links to our resources, and I'll encourage everyone to access those in just a moment. At the Canadian Red Cross, we've been delivering IHL education to youth with the support of teachers for almost 20 years now. And this is an extension of our mandate to ensure knowledge and respect of international humanitarian law across Canada. As of now, we have a network of about 800 teachers across the country who have been trained to deliver humanitarian education lessons in their classrooms. And I'll now provide a brief introduction to our resources, which includes 3 lesson packs and an online interactive tool. And I'll also focus on some examples of how the methodology in each of the resources helps guide student reflections on armed conflict. Just try to move us along here. And it's trying to play the video. Apologies. I'll go to the next slide. I'm so sorry. I'll have to restart the slide deck in just a moment. But if you can see in the chat, I've posted links to our Tools for Teachers page. And what you can see there is links to all of our lesson packs, which includes the Exploring Humanitarian Law lesson pack. It also includes Canada and Conflict, Forced to Fight, which we'll demo in just a moment. And it also includes the Humanitarian Education Curriculum Guidebook, which matches the stories in Forced to Fight. So this is a QR code to our Tools for Teachers page here. Again, it's linked in the chat. We also have a resource that's been developed and refreshed over the last few years by the teachers in our network. It's a 4-pager on navigating challenging conversations in your classroom. So it highlights the lessons that best help set the stage for challenging conversations. It pulls out, again, the methodological tools and some of the additional discussion questions in our resources that, again, help explore some difficult questions with students. It also includes links to external resources with additional helpful tips for creating an environment that's conducive to having difficult conversations in the classroom. So you're also probably wondering, at least some of you might be wondering, what is international humanitarian law? So we'll jump right in. We have 2 helpful animations here from the International Committee of the Red Cross, and you can use these in accompaniment with any of the introductory lessons that introduce students to international humanitarian law. Again, we're not viewing the videos today, but I will paste these in the chat in just a moment. For now, just to give an example of how you would use this, after using one or more of the videos with your students, you could expand on students' understanding of international humanitarian law using some of the summary tools in the lesson packs. And then you would further extrapolate on the definition of international humanitarian law that's included in all of the resources, which states that international humanitarian law is a set of both written and unwritten rules, and it aims to protect life and human dignity during an armed conflict. It also aims to prevent and reduce the suffering and devastation caused by war. It applies specifically during armed conflict, and it applies to wars between states as well as non-international armed conflicts, but it doesn't occur during other situations of violence that might happen during peacetime. And it's really important to emphasize that international humanitarian law aims to mitigate the worst of violence and destruction for both those engaged in the conflict and those who are not or are no longer involved in fighting. So as we're about to go through the lesson packs, hopefully I can go to the next slide without prompting a video. There we go. Okay, so our foundational resource is the Exploring Humanitarian Law lesson pack. This was developed by the International Committee of the Red Cross about 25 or 26 years ago. It was first developed in 1999, updated in 2009, and it's inspired the development of many resources, not only within the Canadian Red Cross, but other national societies. The Exploring Humanitarian Law lesson pack uses real case studies, and it builds on students' own experiences and their ways of thinking to help them examine the destructiveness of war. So the case studies that are in each of the lessons specifically describe the behaviors of actual people who are caught in situations where a humanitarian act might be required. And when students examine these situations, they develop new perspectives and they begin to understand the need for rules that protect life and human dignity. So as you see here, there's 5 modules in this resource. There is a flow to the modules that help, again, set the stage for looking at the nature of a humanitarian act and better understanding international humanitarian law before jumping into avenues for justice and additional humanitarian themes. So the first module looks at the role of the bystander and the nature of humanitarian acts. The second module covers the necessity of regulating armed conflicts. It helps students explore the basic rules of international humanitarian law by providing plain language summary sheets, and it includes additional case studies on themes that students find particularly interesting and sometimes particularly challenging about international humanitarian law, including the impact of armed conflict on children, as well as prohibited weapons. The third module looks at how international humanitarian law is supposed to be applied in the battlefield. The fourth module covers judicial and non-judicial avenues for justice. And the fifth module looks at the necessity for humanitarian action. And it also looks at ethical considerations when coordinating a humanitarian response to armed conflict. We also have a companion toolkit called Canada in Conflict. This was developed 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, so we're coming up on the 10th anniversary. There were 15 teachers across Canada, as well as personnel within the Canadian Red Cross who developed the resource. It follows the same flow as the Exploring Humanitarian Law Toolkit. As you can see here, it includes case studies specific to Canada. And then over the next few slides that I have here, I'm going to walk everyone through some of the basic functions of our third tool. It's our online interactive resource, Force to Fight, developed in 2019 by over 70 professionals, including students, teachers, humanitarians who were impacted by armed conflicts. We included the perspectives of protection delegates. We had representatives from the Office of the Judge Advocate General of the Canadian Armed Forces review the resource. So a lot of real and expert opinion went into the development of this resource. The stories that are included in both the student and the teacher experience are identical, as are the learning points in each story. And I'll explain what those are in just a moment. The only thing that's different about the teacher experience is links to lessons in the classroom. And they come directly from the Exploring Humanitarian Law and the Canada and Conflict lesson packs that I just reviewed. I'll also show the full functionality of Forced to Fight, and we'll walk through an exploration from the perspective of the teacher's experience. And you'll also, if you're visiting the Forced to Fight website from the Tools for Teachers page that I linked, you'll also note that all of the stories are available in both English and French. And there's also a disclaimer here explaining that the resource isn't to be used by people under the age of 13 years old. We do also have access to Kids Help Phone on the front page of the resource. So covering the methodologies, one of the core methodologies in our resources, including Forced to Fight, is use of story. So why do we use stories to teach international humanitarian law? We find that stories build empathy in students for the experience of those who suffer the effects of armed conflict. They impart humanitarian values in students. They make lessons memorable, and stories also encourage students to research more on the topics that they are learning about in the lessons and in the stories in Forced to Fight. And hearing from our teachers every year, students taking on their own research is one of the top outcomes that we hear from teachers as a result of using the lessons in the classroom. Dilemmas are another core methodology, and they reinforce the reality that there's no easy answers in armed conflict. Your students also encounter dilemmas already in some of the discussions that they're having, in particular discussions where they might be navigating misinformation that they're encountering online, as well as sometimes extreme or polarizing perspectives about humanitarian themes and armed conflict. Dilemmas are essentially at the heart of the choices that are in each of the stories in Forced to Fight. And they're also one of the core methodologies throughout all of the lesson packs that we went through. So what you see here is the dilemma worksheet. Again, it appears in all of the lesson packs, and it's meant to accompany the case examples as students are evaluating and identifying the dilemma in case studies that they discuss. And so students identify possible actions that could be taken in a scenario they're reviewing, and they evaluate the reasons for choosing as well as the reasons for not choosing a certain action. And so the social pressure line is another helpful tool that you can use in the discussion. So this is directly in the resources, and it helps students identify the variables that determine the extent of pressure that they or another actor they're evaluating in a case scenario feel towards acting in favor of or acting against carrying out a humanitarian act. So as we jump into Forced to Fight, I'll again point out here that the user has four, in this case, fictitious stories to choose from after clicking I'm a student or I'm a teacher. Both students and teachers are presented with the exact same stories. They can choose Anna to learn about the issue of sexual and gender-based violence, Tam to explore the issue of recruitment of child soldiers, Nora to explore the issue of refugees and forced migration, or Miguel to explore how international humanitarian law is supposed to protect the natural environment, as well as the related impacts of armed conflict on Indigenous communities. So Anna, Tam's, and Miguel's stories, their experiences happen to take place directly in an armed conflict, while Nora's experience takes place alongside a peer who has escaped an armed conflict. And all of the stories were deliberately written with this range of content, keeping in mind the diverse experiences, needs, as well as the diverse interests of students in Canada. And so in each experience, students and teachers can learn more about dilemmas faced by everyday people affected by armed conflict, as well as how to get involved via the additional resources that are linked throughout. So it's not just lessons that are linked in the teacher's experience. There's additional learning points, which we call factoids, and additional guidance on how students can learn more about the issues that they are exploring. So over the next few slides, I'll demo the content and functional features of Nora's story, which happens to be one of the most accessible and the quickest to work through. So once we've selected our character, each story frame, as you can see here, is accompanied by images. If you're exploring Forced to Fight on your own device, it's also accompanied by audio that immerses the user in the narrative. So you can toggle the audio for each story on or off by clicking on there's a little microphone icon at the top menu of Forced to Fight. Each story also begins with a mission, which we see here. And then to progress through the narrative, the user has to click continue, and occasionally the user is presented with a menu of choices, much like in what would be a choose your own adventure story, even though the format is choose your own adventure, but there's nothing really adventurous about exploring choices that people have to make in armed conflict. So then we have, as we see here with the choices, our dilemmas. The choices that the user has to make, again, they reflect real dilemmas in armed conflict, even though these are fictitious stories. The nature of the choices are based on real events. There's, again, also no easy answers. So whether a choice seems right might or might not always be clear. And much like in real life, good choices don't always guarantee happy endings. And so teachers can encourage students to try to make less desirable choices to have access to more learning moments that are embedded in the experience. And then throughout Nora's story, the dilemmas also reinforce learning the role of the bystander and the nature of a humanitarian act. The learning points also reinforce learnings from the modules that cover the humanitarian response to armed conflict, and we'll look at those in just a moment. And then students can also fill out the dilemma worksheet that we just looked at when they reach different choices in Forced to Fight. So the factoids, we also have one here, and then another on the next slide. So where a yellow question mark is present, the user can click on the question mark to read a factoid that contains more information related to the issue or the dilemma that's presented on the screen. And again, both students and teachers have access to the factoids in their experience. Here we see, in this example, Nora and her classmates are helping connect Danny, who has left her country, and she's attending their school. They've helped her at their local Red Crescent, and the Learning Point gives more information about the Restoring Family Links program, along with a link to the Restoring Family Links website on ICRC's website. And then also, as you can see here, the teacher's experience includes links to the additional lessons that you might consider as you're exploring this moment in the story. So in both experiences, when you reach the end of the story, the user is presented with other options so they can explore the other stories, but they can also, as you see here, they have a map that shows the choices that they made. And so again, this encourages further exploration of the story and other choices that could have been made. And again, they evaluate the dilemmas and whether or not the choices are easy depending on the pressures that are present. The teacher's experience also includes, again, teaching resources at the very end of each journey. And while we briefly looked at Nora's story today, I also wanted to quickly highlight Miguel's story as our newest edition in 2022. His story includes more factoids about international humanitarian law specifically. It opens with a factoid providing an overview of the Geneva Conventions and additional protocols. And it also has a factoid on how Indigenous communities are often disproportionately affected by armed conflict. So we do continue to learn through feedback from teachers the importance of using story to teach international humanitarian law. And so we continue to lean into it as an important teaching tool. And with this in mind, we also recognize the importance of helping teachers use the stories in Forced to Fight with lessons that are specific to each of the characters. So in 2022, we also launched our Humanitarian Education Curriculum Guidebook. It's our 4th resource. This is another lesson pack. And as you can see here, all of the modules in this resource, while they contain some of the important lessons from exploring humanitarian law and Canada in conflict, they also cover the themes and stories in Forced to Fight. So you have a module devoted to the basic rules of international humanitarian law, in addition to modules that focus on each of the four themes in Forced to Fight. So another methodological tool that you can consider, and again, this is it's embedded in the lessons in Nora's experience, it's use of small groups for brainstorming and discussion. And so since we looked at Nora's story, we can also look at the lesson built around using small groups to brainstorm solutions to the humanitarian response to armed conflict. And in our lessons that explore the humanitarian response to armed conflict, students can brainstorm the needs of people who are forced to flee, and they can map essential services by planning a camp. So they would do this using logistics templates, demographic data, and mapping tools like maps and various software tools or arts and crafts supplies to build and map out dioramas of solutions that they brainstorm and plan together. So as we can see from one of our teachers here, the lessons do tend to inspire more thoughtful responses from students who are exploring the humanitarian needs of people who are forced to flee. And in this example, going through this exploration encouraged students to, as they were evaluating services, look more into the Restoring Family Links program. And most of the lessons also begin and end with a menu of discussion questions to help teachers alongside students assess prior knowledge about international humanitarian law and the humanitarian themes, as well as the needs of people who are displaced by armed conflict. So the discussion questions help build students' skills and dialogue with each other, and they expand on what they learn together. So coming out of an exploration of Nora's story, which is then followed by a lesson brainstorming a list of needs for people who are displaced by armed conflict, you can ask students where on their list of essential needs they would put dignity. And you can expand on the discussion by asking your students to define dignity, and then ask, does dignity need to be earned? And then connect their discussion to the inclusion of dignity in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the aims of international humanitarian law. And this is one of my favorite student reactions coming out of this exploration on the similarities and differences between international humanitarian law and human rights law. So the teachers reflected that the students said, I didn't know I had these. I didn't know everyone had these. This changes everything. I need to go back and delete some Instagram posts, and these equals human rights. So we do strongly encourage and create opportunities for youth to engage with experts who have experience navigating the humanitarian consequences of armed conflict. Every year we have an online humanitarian education youth action summit. In addition to the resources that I just highlighted, there is a lesson and activity pack, which is free to all teachers who register. The summit activities include curated lessons as well as guidance sheets for students to develop their own activity as a result of what they've learned in the classroom. And they can submit their activity to the summit. So it's a live online event. Teachers and students, whether it's through a club or the classrooms, they're encouraged to join live or asynchronously, whatever is most effective for them. And again, registering for the summit also gives teachers access to the lesson and activity pack. So I'm also going to include a link in the chat to sign up for our resources. This will give you an opportunity to receive our bi-monthly humanitarian education newsletter, where we link current events to the lessons in our resources. And we also use the sign-up sheet to give access to our upcoming events. And again, we'll send along the information about the Youth Action Summit. So I think what I will do now is, if there's time, just end with a question, and that would be, what questions might your students have about armed conflict and international humanitarian law? So you can either leave with that reflection or ask it in the chat. We love to stay on our toes and receive some of those tough questions from your students and discuss some of the approaches teachers in our network have used to talk about some of those really challenging perspectives about armed conflict and international humanitarian law. So I think I'll stop sharing there, and I'll hand it over to Valerie for any additional comments and questions that might come from others.
All right, thank you very much, Andrea. So far, I don't know if I see anything in the chat. If anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand. We have about 3 minutes left, and then the presenters have also kind of agreed to stay for a few minutes after 8 o'clock, just to answer a few questions if need be. I personally found your presentation very interesting as somebody who has taught grade 12 law in the past, but I did not, it was one of the first years of my career, so I did not know that the Red Cross had like resources like this. But I think it's the resource that you showed is very interesting because, at least for me, I work in a very small community, and students can't really wrap their head around like armed conflict, and the fact that like kids their age and younger are often like the victims of this. So having something that's kind of like you said, kind of like a choose your own path, I think makes it a little bit more real for them. So I'm very much looking forward to like sharing this with my colleague who now teaches the grade 12 law class. Oh, Butch, did you have a question?
Yeah, my question, I guess, is you're dealing with controversial topics here, and obviously we can have present day applications to it. Have you faced any like pushback from school boards or anything for going in to have these presentations or anything?
Yeah, from teachers from time to time, and it really comes down to that conversation about knowing your students. So sometimes we have 800 teachers in our network. Sometimes we'll have teachers reach out to us and say, listen, I have a really challenging cohort this year. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it. Occasionally, the decision is no, we wouldn't recommend pushing through with students, especially a strong cohort with very recent lived experience. That can be really challenging to navigate. The main modules that we encourage a teacher, like it really depends on the need. If a teacher wants to impart humanitarian values in their students, if that's their goal, the lessons in Module 1, in particular, some of the lessons in Canada and conflict, there's an exploration on Pink Shirt Day, which is really accessible to students of backgrounds at high schools. So really get students to think about, again, how they would, how they might interfere with someone who, or how they might act in a humanitarian way to help someone who's being persecuted in their school, or to help students who are being bullied. These are very accessible topics to students. There's also in Module 1 an overview of the 7 fundamental principles of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. So again, focusing on imparting humanitarian values, if that's a teacher's goal, if they want to do something but don't want to get into the really challenging topics, that's what we would recommend.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add to Andrea's presentation because Andrea trained me. I have had the pleasure of being through the whole program with the Red Cross, and there are so many different accessible points. And you can, if you know your students, you can go through and look at all the modules and you can tailor it to what you need. And it's all, you can do as much or as little as you need to. Thank you.
All right, I'll give any opportunity. I didn't see any hands raised, but I'm not able to see all of the thumbnails, but it does not look like we have any questions at this time. If you happen to have any follow-up questions for the exec team, for OHASTA, feel free to reach out through our contacts on our website. I would like to just take a moment to thank both of our presenters tonight, Andrea and Anthony. We really appreciate that you were able to bring these resources to us and kick off our webinar series. Thank you very much.